Ritchie Blackmore may be the original guitar shredder, but there's a lot more to him than that, and some of his great qualities, such as his songwriting and his ability to create spontaneously in the studio, as well as his on-stage persona and his theatrics and showmanship, seldom get the kind of attention that I feel they deserve. But there's yet another quality about Ritchie Blackmore that I think is gone unnoticed that Brian May points out in the following clip. So let's listen to what Brian May had to say about Ritchie Blackmore real quick.
Ritchie was a figure of mystery and wonder already. Ritchie Blackmore was something incredible. I mean, nobody could play like that in those days. And it's hard to imagine. It's like going back to, I'm an old man now, I can talk about these things. It's like going back to before the time there were wheels, People did not play like that in those days. You're looking at people who played sort of jazz, very kind of safe and rather mellow, and apart from Django Reinhardt, rather slow, But Ritchie came along and he's a fireball, he really is, he's beyond belief. His technique is incredible. Where did that come from? I have no idea. He's able to play very fast, very accurate, and very passionate. He's wanging the guitar all over the place. He's using his tremolo bar. He's making the whole thing into a completely different instrument. This is before Hendrix.
Alright, the most important part I think in that statement is this was before Hendrix, and this is something that I myself had never really sat down and seriously considered before, which is Ritchie Blackmore had developed his neoclassical and almost psychedelic style prior to the time that Deep Purple emerged as a heavy rock band. He was doing it when Deep Purple was still playing with symphonies, and this is before Jimi Hendrix broke through. Now, Ritchie Blackmore has said over and over again in interviews that Jimi Hendrix inspired early Deep Purple tremendously and directly influenced their moving toward a hard rock sound. But what Brian May points out right here is that Ritchie had kind of already kicked off the virtuoso, wild man of the guitar and also the mystery man of the guitar thing way before Hendrix or Jimmy Page got it going. Now, here's something else to keep in mind. In the following clip with Ritchie Blackmore, he explained why he started to incorporate elements of flash and showmanship into his playing. So let's listen to Ritchie Blackmore speak right here.
So-called showmanship, because I'm an introverted person. On stage I can be extroverted when I feel like it, as long as I've had a few of these. Screaming or such, because I used to hide. I'd be on stage and I used to kind of hide in the wings, and he would come over to me dressed with his cow horns and his lavatory seat around his neck, and he'd grab me and pull me out the front. Move! And I'd go, and everybody had to move like this, in time.
So when Blackmore was playing with Screaming Lord Sutch, he was made to do onstage antics and made to become a showman, even though this was not something that was part of his personality. And he points out there in that clip that he usually likes to have a few beers to get him in the mood. But what I'm saying is that he learned that flash and spectacle be part of musicianship, not just part of showmanship on stage, but part of musicianship. And there is a precedent for this that's not necessarily even in the guitarists that might have influenced Blackmore, like Django Reinhardt or Cliff Gallup or Scotty Moore or any of the guitarists of that rockabilly or blues generation. Instead, he might have taken his inspiration for guitar flash from the classical field, and of course I'm talking about Paganini. So if you don't know who Paganini is, he was a virtuoso violinist, and he is well known for kind of originating the shred on the violin. And Blackmore, of course, is a well-known obsessive aficionado for classical music and medieval music. So I think that perhaps early on he took some inspiration from Paganini, but what he did with that inspiration is exactly what Brian May is saying here. He combined it with showmanship and mystery to create a guitar hero persona even before there was such a thing. And even though he was expected at the time to still be a sideman, even in Deep Purple, although he was a soloist, he's part of an ensemble. He wasn't supposed to be necessarily the center of attention or the star of the show. Now, what I think is really important, what Brian May said there, is that Blackmore was doing all of this prior to the time that Hendrix emerged on the scene. When Hendrix came on the scene, he took it all to a completely new level, took it all to 11, and started to do things on stage that nobody would have imagined before, like burning his guitar and destroying his amplifiers and stuff like this. Well, later, of course, at California Jam, Ritchie Blackmore lit his amplifiers on fire and they famously exploded, blew off Ian Pace's glasses, and almost burned Ritchie Blackmore himself. But what I'm saying is the idea of including this wild spectacle along with guitar playing did not exist before Blackmore and Hendrix and Page and Townsend to some extent pulled it out of thin air, and it became a part of the guitar and part of guitar player lore and legend and persona that persists to this day, at least to the idea that you have to stun people with your technique. If you're not going to light your guitar on fire, you have to blow them away with your playing. And I think all of that started, just as Brian May points out here, with Ritchie Blackmore. And I think this is something that I had personally overlooked. So I'm glad to have come across this interview because it reminds me how fundamentally important Blackmore is, not only to neoclassical guitar, but to the idea of modern rock guitar as a whole. This is what I think, but what really matters is what you think. So if you have an idea about this or any other topic connected to classic or contemporary music, please drop it in the section below, and remember to like and subscribe. Also, if you're enjoying the videos, you can click on the thanks button right down there below. Leave a donation, or if you prefer, you can click on the Buy Me a Coffee link, go to the Buy Me a Coffee site and leave a donation over there. Finally, if you need an occasional financial boost, you can click on the Capital One link down below in the description box and use their handy one-step application process to get yourself a new credit card. And if you do that, channel will get a small bonus. Thanks a lot.